Emma came to Aspen Creek for one reason. Sell the building. Close the chapter. Leave. She didn't expect the past to still be alive. And she didn't expect the truth to be waiting for her there. Emma stepped off the bus and stood still for a moment longer than necessary, as if her body needed time to accept where it was. Aspen Creek greeted her without ceremony. No rush of traffic, no glass towers reflecting ambition, no hum of urgency beneath every sound. Just mountains, cool air, and a town that seemed perfectly comfortable moving at its own pace. She adjusted the strap of her carry-on bag and glanced around, orienting herself. The bus pulled away almost immediately, leaving behind a silence that felt deliberate rather than empty. Somewhere down the street, a door creaked open. A dog barked once and then quieted. The rhythm of the place was slow, unforced, almost stubborn. Emma exhaled through her nose and began walking. Main Street curved gently between low buildings, most of them older than she was. Wood, brick, faded paint. Storefronts that hadn't been redesigned to attract attention because they didn't need to be. People here knew where they were going. She passed the cafe, the hardware store, the post office. Landmarks she remembered not by their names, but by how they used to feel. Familiar, but no longer hers. Her phone vibrated in her coat pocket. Instinctively, she reached for it, already prepared to answer, to redirect, to solve. But it was only a calendar reminder she had set days ago. Aspen Creek, bookstore assessment. She silenced it and kept walking. The bookstore appeared at the far end of the street, exactly where it had always been. 2 stories. Brick facade softened by time. The wooden sign still hung above the entrance, crooked enough to suggest neglect but not decay. Emma slowed her steps, her gaze sharpening as she took it in. She didn't allow herself nostalgia. She didn't need it. Exterior brickwork, weathered but stable. Windows, original, likely inefficient, but intact. Roofline, uneven, possibly minor structural settling. The building wasn't charming. It was functional, with potential. That was enough. Emma unlocked the door and stepped inside. The bell above the entrance rang once, thin and metallic, before settling back into silence. Dust hung in the air, illuminated by pale light filtering through tall front windows. The smell hit her immediately. Paper, wood, something faintly damp near the back. The place had been closed for too long. She moved deeper inside, her boots echoing softly against the floorboards. Shelves lined the walls, heavy with books that had been read, loved, and forgotten. Some were organized meticulously, others stacked wherever space had allowed. The counter at the front bore scratches, small burns, the imprint of years of use. Emma set her bag down and pulled out her folder. She worked methodically, backroom first, then storage. She noted water stains near one corner, tested a loose shelf, opened drawers, checked old paperwork left behind. Her mind slipped into a familiar rhythm. Observe, assess, prioritize. This was what she was good at. This was controllable. Selling the bookstore wasn't emotional. It was practical. The property carried obligations, legal, financial, historical. Clearing them would close a loop that had been open far too long. She would prepare it, raise its value just enough, and move on. That was the plan she had committed to long before she arrived. A sound outside broke her focus. Emma straightened, instinctively alert. Footsteps. Slow, steady. She turned toward the window just as someone passed by, carrying several wooden planks balanced easily against one shoulder. The movement was unhurried but precise, practiced. When the man adjusted his grip, his face turned toward the store. Their eyes met. The recognition was immediate and unsettling. Ryan. For a fraction of a second, Emma didn't move, didn't breathe. The past surged forward without permission. Sunlit afternoons, sawdust in the air, laughter echoing between shelves, promises made without fully understanding their weight. Ryan stopped walking. Emma, he said, the word landing carefully, as if unsure it would stay real once spoken. She stepped outside before thinking it through. Yes, she answered. It's me. They stood a few feet apart, close enough to recognize every detail, far enough to preserve distance. He looked older, more solid, like someone who had grown into the life he stayed with. The lines at his eyes weren't signs of wear. They were evidence of years lived fully, deliberately. I heard you were back, Ryan said. Didn't think it was true. I'm not staying. Emma replied immediately, the words too quick, too rehearsed. Just here to deal with the bookstore. He glanced past her, toward the open door, toward the building that had once been the center of something neither of them had been able to finish. Selling it, he asked. Yes. She didn't soften it, didn't defend it. She had learned long ago that clarity prevented complications. Ryan nodded once. His expression didn't change much, but something tightened in his jaw. That figures. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was heavy, full of things they both remembered but hadn't agreed on. I should get back, he said after a moment. Workshop's busy. Of course, Emma replied. Then hesitated. Ryan. He waited. The words rose and fell inside her, unformed. Apologies were pointless. Explanations would only open doors she wasn't sure she could close again. Never mind, she said finally. Ryan gave a faint smile, polite but distant. Welcome back to Aspen Creek, Emma. He walked away, the plank steady on his shoulder, his pace unchanged. He didn't look back. Emma stood there longer than necessary, watching him disappear around the corner. Something tight settled in her chest, unfamiliar and unwelcome. She turned back into the bookstore and closed the door behind her. The bell rang once. Inside, the silence felt different now. She returned to the counter, to her folder, to her notes, but the rhythm was gone. Her pen hovered longer over each line. The building no longer felt like a neutral asset. It felt occupied, alive with memory. Selling the bookstore was still the objective, but Aspen Creek was no longer just a task on a list. And Ryan, whether she wanted to admit it or not, had already complicated everything. The next morning, Aspen Creek woke slowly. Emma noticed it from the front window of the bookstore as she stood with a cup of coffee she hadn't finished. People didn't rush here. They paused to talk, crossed the street without looking over their shoulders, stopped in the middle of conversations without apologizing for it. Time, she realized, wasn't something they fought. She turned back inside and opened her folder again. Her notes from the previous day stared back at her. Structural concerns, outdated wiring, cosmetic decay. If the bookstore was going to sell for anything close to its potential, it needed work. Real work, not surface-level staging, but repairs that required skill and local knowledge. Which left her with one obvious problem. Ryan. Emma didn't like dependencies. She especially didn't like personal ones layered on top of professional necessity. But Aspen Creek wasn't the city. There were no endless contractors, no anonymous firms bidding for projects. Here, reputation mattered more than speed, and everyone knew who did the best work. By mid-morning, she locked the bookstore and walked toward the workshop at the edge of town. The sound reached her before the building did, steady hammering, the scrape of wood, the low murmur of conversation. The workshop doors were open, sunlight spilling across the floor. Inside, Ryan worked at a long table with another man, both focused, both silent. Sawdust clung to the air like pollen. Emma stopped just outside the doorway. Ryan noticed her almost immediately. He straightened, wiped his hands on a rag, and said something quietly to his coworker before walking over. This early, he asked, neutral, unreadable. I didn't know when a good time would be, Emma replied. So I came. He nodded once. That tracks. She took a breath. I need to talk to you. About the bookstore. Ryan crossed his arms, not defensive, just contained. Go on. It needs renovation, she said, opening her folder and flipping to her notes. Not cosmetic fixes. Structural reinforcement, shelving repair, some custom work. Enough to raise the value before sale. He listened without interrupting. And you want me to do it, he said. Yes. Ryan studied her for a long moment, then glanced back toward the workshop, toward the tools, the half-finished projects, the life he had built without her. You're planning to sell it anyway, he said. Why should I help? Emma expected the question. She had rehearsed the answer on the walk over, stripped of emotion, built on logic. Because you care about the building, she said simply. And because you'll do it right. Ryan's mouth curved slightly, not quite a smile. That's not an answer that benefits me. No, Emma agreed. But it's the honest one. Silence stretched between them, filled only by the distant sound of sanding. Finally, Ryan sighed. I'll do it, he said. On one condition. Emma waited. We don't rush it, Ryan continued. I don't cut corners to meet some artificial deadline. If I take this on, it gets done properly, or not at all. Emma hesitated. Every instinct pushed back against the idea of slowing down. Time was leverage. Time was money. Time was control. But she nodded. Agreed. They shook hands. The contact was brief, professional, but the awareness lingered longer than either of them acknowledged. Work began that afternoon. Ryan walked through the bookstore with her, pointing out things she hadn't noticed, not flaws, but possibilities. He tapped a wall and explained how the structure could support built-in shelving. He crouched to examine the floorboards, testing their give, mentally mapping what lay beneath. Emma followed, listening, adjusting her expectations with every observation. "You keep looking at it like a problem to solve," Ryan said at one point, straightening. "It's not a spreadsheet." "It is to me," she replied. He gave a low chuckle. "That's going to be an issue." They worked side by side over the next few days. Emma handled permits, schedules, supply orders. Ryan handled wood, tools, decisions that couldn't be rushed. Their approaches clashed constantly, hers precise and forward-driving, his deliberate and patient. "You don't need to triple-check that measurement," Emma said one afternoon. "Yes, I do," Ryan replied calmly. "Because if it's wrong, everything built on it is wrong." She didn't argue. She watched instead. Gradually, something shifted. Emma began to notice how Ryan worked, not just what he did, but how. He adjusted plans mid-process without frustration. He stopped when something didn't feel right, even if it meant losing time. His pride wasn't in speed or completion, but in durability. And Ryan noticed her too. She didn't hover. She didn't micromanage. When she caught a scheduling conflict, she solved it quietly. When a supplier delayed delivery, she made a call and smoothed it out before it reached him. She didn't announce competence. She demonstrated it. By the end of the week, the bookstore no longer felt stagnant. Shelves stood straighter. Light moved differently through the space. The building responded to their presence, to the care being put back into it. One evening, as they locked up together, Ryan paused at the door. "You're different," he said, not accusing, not admiring, just stating a fact. Emma met his gaze. "So are you." "Yes," he agreed. "But I stayed." The words weren't sharp. They didn't need to be. Emma nodded once. "I know." They stood there for a moment, the air cooling as the sun dipped behind the mountains. The renovation had begun, not just of the building, but of something far more complicated. And neither of them could pretend anymore that it was purely business. The rhythm of work settled in quietly. Emma stopped measuring her days and hours and started noticing them in progress. One repaired beam, one reinforced shelf, one problem resolved before it became visible. She still woke early, still reviewed her notes each morning, but Aspen Creek resisted urgency. It absorbed her momentum and returned it slower, steadier. Ryan noticed before she did. "You're not fighting the place anymore," he said one afternoon as they stood near the back wall, watching sunlight catch in the newly sanded wood. "I never was," Emma replied automatically. Ryan raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. The bookstore had become a shared space. Ryan arrived first, unlocked the door, and began work before Emma showed up with coffee and updated schedules. Their conversations were short, efficient, and increasingly unnecessary. They anticipated each other's needs without discussing them, which made the tension harder to ignore. It surfaced in the smallest moments, when Emma leaned over a table to review measurements and Ryan stepped back just a fraction too late, when their hands brushed reaching for the same tool, when silence stretched longer than it needed to. Neither addressed it. That changed the afternoon Tyler arrived. He didn't come quietly. His car, sleek, expensive, entirely wrong for Aspen Creek, drew attention the moment it rolled down Main Street. Emma saw it from the bookstore window and felt the tightening in her chest before she recognized the reason. Tyler stepped out, impeccably dressed, scanning the street like he was evaluating an acquisition. Ryan noticed her stillness. "Problem?" "Possibly," Emma said. Tyler entered the bookstore with a practiced smile. "Emma." "Tyler," she replied, neutral. His gaze flicked past her, taking in the half-finished shelves, the exposed beams. "I see you've started improvements." "Necessary ones." "Costly," he said lightly. "You should be careful. Overinvesting in a declining asset is a common mistake." Ryan approached from behind her. "Is there something I can help you with?" Tyler turned, surprise flickering across his face before it smoothed into polite disinterest. "And you are?" "Ryan," he said. "I'm doing the renovations." Tyler nodded, already dismissing him. "I'm Emma's former business partner." "Former." The word landed deliberately. "I was in the area," Tyler continued, turning back to Emma. "Thought I'd check in. See how things were progressing." "They're progressing fine." "Are they?" Tyler smiled. Because from where I stand, this looks sentimental. Ryan stiffened beside her. Emma didn't. I didn't ask for your assessment. No, Tyler agreed. You never do. That was always our problem. Ryan watched the exchange closely now, understanding without context that this wasn't a casual visit. Tyler lowered his voice. You still plan to sell, right? Yes. Good. He glanced around once more. Because if you don't, you'll regret it. Ryan spoke before Emma could. That sounds like a threat. Tyler's eyes sharpened. It's a warning. Emma stepped between them, not physically, but decisively. We're done here. Tyler studied her, then smiled again. Of course. I'll be in touch. After he left, the bookstore felt different. Smaller. Tighter. Ryan didn't speak until Emma closed the door and locked it. Former partner? He asked. Yes. Does he usually show up unannounced to places you're trying to sell? No. Ryan nodded slowly. Then he wants something. Emma exhaled. He always does. They returned to work, but the rhythm had fractured. Ryan's movements were sharper, his silence heavier. Emma noticed and hated herself for not having warned him. Later, as they cleaned up for the day, Ryan finally spoke again. You should have told me. I didn't think it mattered. It matters when someone walks in like he owns the place, Ryan said. This isn't just your problem if I'm working here. Emma met his gaze. I didn't want to pull you into old conflicts. Ryan shook his head. You already did. The moment you asked me to help. The truth of it settled between them. That night, Emma lay awake in her rented room above the cafe, replaying Tyler's words. Overinvesting. Regret. She had heard them before, packaged as advice, delivered as control. Down the street, Ryan sat in his workshop longer than usual, staring at a beam he'd already finished shaping. The fractures weren't in the walls. They were in the past, and they had just resurfaced. The misunderstanding surfaced not as an argument, but as a problem that refused to stay buried. It began with a table. Ryan had sketched it late the night before. Long, low, built to sit near the front window where morning light fell cleanly across the floor. It wasn't part of the original plan. The bookstore didn't need it. But the space had been asking for something grounding, something that invited people to stay. Emma found the drawing folded on the counter the next morning. She studied it longer than she intended to. The proportions were careful, restrained. No wasted lines. The kind of design that didn't try to impress, only to last. You didn't mention adding furniture, she said when Ryan arrived. I wasn't sure it would fit what you had in mind. She tapped the paper. It fits the space. Ryan looked surprised. You think so? I think it makes people slow down. She paused. That's not a bad thing. They decided to build it together. It wasn't efficient in the way Emma usually preferred. Two people working on a single piece meant overlapping decisions, minor delays, adjustments. But something about the process felt right. Ryan handled the wood, Emma measured and remeasured, recalculating placement with an eye toward flow rather than speed. They talked as they worked. Not about Tyler. Not about the sale. About small things at first, where Emma had learned to draft contracts by hand. How Ryan had taken apart his first piece of furniture just to understand why it failed. The past crept in quietly, uninvited but persistent. Do you remember the house we planned? Ryan asked as he sanded the edge of the tabletop. Emma's hand stilled on the tape measure. The one by the river? With the stupid porch, he said. You said it would never survive winter. It would have, she replied. I was exaggerating. Ryan smiled faintly. You always did when you were scared. She looked up. I wasn't scared. You were, he said, not accusing. So was I. The memory settled between them, not warm, not painful, just unresolved. They worked in silence for a while after that. It was Emma who broke it. You left without talking to me, she said. 10 years ago. Ryan didn't stop sanding. You told me you were leaving. I told you I'd been offered a position. I didn't say I was taking it. You didn't say you weren't. She let out a slow breath. I thought you understood what it meant. Ryan finally looked at her. I thought you'd already chosen. The realization was quiet, almost anticlimactic. No dramatic reveal. No anger. Just two interpretations colliding after a decade of distance. Emma looked back at the table between them. Unfinished, raw, but solid. Why didn't you call? Ryan shrugged once. I didn't want to be the thing that held you back. I never asked you to. I know, he said. That was the problem. They finished the table by late afternoon. When they set it in place, it anchored the room exactly as Ryan had imagined. People passing outside slowed, curious. One woman stepped in, asked if the bookstore was open yet. Soon, Emma said. The word lingered. That evening, Emma reviewed her notes alone. The sale timeline was still there, still logical. But it no longer felt inevitable. Not because of romance, not because of nostalgia, but because the bookstore had changed. It was becoming something with roots. Ryan locked up the workshop later than usual, replaying the conversation in his head. Not with regret, but with clarity. The past hadn't broken them. It had simply gone unexamined. For the first time since Emma arrived, both of them understood the same thing. They hadn't failed each other. They had just stopped building too soon. The pressure didn't arrive all at once. It accumulated. The bookstore became a place where time folded inward. Days lost their edges. Morning blurred into late afternoon, and evenings stretched until the town outside went dark and quiet. The renovation was close. Close enough to feel finished, far enough to demand everything they still had. Ryan worked with a stubborn intensity that had nothing to do with deadlines and everything to do with pride. He rebuilt sections that would never be seen by customers, corrected alignments that only he would notice. Each choice was deliberate, permanent. Emma adjusted around him without disrupting his rhythm. She rerouted deliveries when a shipment arrived early. She stood in the cold making calls when a permit stalled. She negotiated a temporary extension with the town council not by insisting, but by reframing the problem until they agreed it had never been one. They did not discuss how well they functioned together. The table by the front window had become a quiet landmark. People passing through Aspen Creek stopped there instinctively. Some sat, some talked. A local teacher asked if she could host a reading night once the store opened. A potter asked about displaying work. Emma wrote everything down. Ryan pretended not to notice. The night Tyler called, Emma was reviewing updated numbers. The projected sale value had shifted, not dramatically, but enough to matter. Enough to raise questions she had avoided answering. She stared at Tyler's name before answering. "You didn't inform me about the expanded renovation," he said. "I didn't need to. You changed the asset profile. I stabilized it. That's not what we discussed." Emma leaned back in her chair. "We discussed outcomes, not methods." Silence stretched. "Then, you're getting attached. That's irrelevant." "It never is," Tyler replied. "I'm coming up tomorrow. I'll be working. Then I'll meet you after." He had already decided. The restaurant he chose felt deliberately detached from Aspen Creek. Steel, glass, curated emptiness. A place that could exist anywhere. Emma recognized the strategy immediately. She arrived late, coat dusted with sawdust. Tyler stood when she approached. "You're still dressed like that." "I came from work." "You could have changed." "I didn't want to." The conversation moved carefully at first. Market trends, investment windows, projected returns. Tyler spoke as if nothing fundamental had shifted. Then he said, "I spoke to a contractor in Denver." Emma set her glass down. "You did what?" "He could finish the remaining work in half the time. Remove risk." "Ryan is not a risk." Tyler smiled thinly. "He's an attachment." The word hit harder than he intended. "He's a professional," Emma said. "And he's already committed. To a project that doesn't benefit him." "That's not true." Tyler leaned forward. "Emma, you're solving the wrong problem. This town isn't your future. It's a detour." She looked at him steadily. "So was our relationship." The air shifted. Tyler recovered quickly. "You're tired. You're romanticizing progress because you're close to it." "I'm close to clarity," she replied. She left before he could respond. The workshop lights were still on when she arrived. Ryan was alone, focused, adjusting the fit of a doorframe. He didn't look up when she entered. "Everything okay?" he asked. "No," she said honestly. She didn't elaborate. He didn't ask. They worked side by side, not touching, but aware of each other's presence. Emma held the frame steady while Ryan secured it. He trusted her without looking. That mattered more than either of them acknowledged. Eventually, Emma spoke. "Tyler wants to replace you." Ryan paused. "With someone better?" "With someone controllable." Ryan absorbed that quietly. "And what do you want?" She didn't answer immediately. She watched him work. Careful, patient, unwilling to compromise even when compromise would be easier. "I want this finished properly," she said. He nodded. "Then we keep going." They stood close after the work was done. Not leaning, not retreating. "This complicates things," Emma said. "Yes. I don't regret staying. I don't regret helping." That was as close as either of them came to admitting what was forming between them. Ryan stepped back. "If this crosses a line, It needs to be intentional. Emma nodded. Agreed. She left a few minutes later. Ryan stayed behind, shutting off the lights one by one. He understood now that the moment they were avoiding wasn't accidental. It was approaching, and next time, stopping might not be an option. The truth didn't arrive as a revelation. It surfaced the way rot does, gradually, through pressure, through the failure of something that was supposed to hold. It started with paperwork. Emma was reviewing old files late one night, long after Ryan had locked up the workshop and gone home. The bookstore was quiet except for the ticking of the radiator and the occasional sound of wind against the windows. She wasn't looking for anything in particular. She was cross-referencing timelines, leases, offers, correspondence, cleaning loose ends the way she always did before closing a deal. That was when she noticed the gap. A missing email chain. A conversation referenced but never forwarded. A delay that hadn't made sense 10 years ago and made even less now. She pulled up older archives. Messages from the year she'd left Aspen Creek. From the months before everything collapsed between her and Ryan. There it was. An email from Tyler. Addressed to her former firm. Not to her. Subject. Regarding Ryan Cole. Conflict of interest. Her pulse didn't spike. It slowed. She read carefully. Tyler had framed it as concern. A local contractor with emotional involvement. A liability. He suggested, politely, strategically, that continuing a personal relationship in Aspen Creek could compromise her credibility if she wanted to advance. He hadn't told her to leave. He had implied she already should have. Emma leaned back, staring at the ceiling. She remembered the conversations from that time. Tyler questioning whether Ryan would understand her ambition, whether Aspen Creek would limit her growth. She remembered Ryan withdrawing, growing distant after she told him about the offer. Neither of them had known they were reacting to a pressure neither had named. The realization settled heavily. The next morning, Emma didn't go to the bookstore first. She went to Ryan's workshop. He was surprised to see her that early. Everything okay? No, she said. But it will be. She handed him the printed email. Ryan read it once. Then again. He didn't get angry. That hurt more. So that's what changed, he said quietly. I didn't know, Emma said. I swear to you I didn't. I believe you. He folded the paper carefully. I just thought you decided I didn't fit. Emma shook her head. I thought you decided not to fight. They stood there, 10 years of silence finally given shape. He made it sound reasonable. Emma continued. Professional. Like concern. I didn't see it for what it was. Ryan nodded slowly. Control. Yes. The word hung between them. Not dramatic, just accurate. I should have talked to you, Emma said. So should I. Neither apologized further. There was nothing left to explain. Later that afternoon, Tyler arrived unannounced. This time, Emma didn't soften her tone. You interfered, she said flatly. Tyler blinked. Excuse me. 10 years ago, you framed it as professional advice. It wasn't. Tyler smiled faintly. You asked me to look out for you. You isolated me. I protected you from a life that would have trapped you. Emma stepped closer. You don't get to define what traps me. Ryan appeared in the doorway, silent but present. Tyler's expression tightened. I see. You don't control this, Emma continued. Not the sale. Not my choices. Not my past. Tyler's voice cooled. Be careful. You're risking a lot. Emma met his gaze. So are you. After he left, the bookstore felt lighter, as if something unseen had finally been removed. That evening, Ryan and Emma worked late, not because they had to, but because neither wanted to leave. They didn't touch. They didn't circle each other. They talked. About the years apart. About the assumptions they'd made. About how easily silence had been mistaken for certainty. This doesn't fix everything, Ryan said eventually. No, Emma agreed. But it explains it. That was enough. When Emma left that night, she paused at the door. Whatever happens next, it's not built on a lie anymore. Ryan nodded. That matters. She walked out into the cold, steady and clear. Behind her, Ryan turned off the lights and understood something he hadn't allowed himself to consider before. They hadn't lost 10 years to distance. They'd lost them to someone else's design. And now that design was exposed. Nothing changed on the surface. The bookstore still opened early for contractors and inspectors. Ryan still arrived before sunrise. Emma still kept notes, adjusted schedules, returned calls. To anyone watching from the outside, Aspen Creek remained quiet, steady, unconcerned. But beneath that calm, The structure was under stress. Emma and Ryan didn't announce anything. They didn't redefine their relationship, didn't make promises. What had shifted between them was subtler and more dangerous: alignment. They were no longer guessing each other's intentions. They worked closer now, not physically, but strategically. When a supplier questioned a delay, Emma stepped in before it became an argument. When a structural issue threatened to stall progress, Ryan adjusted the plan without escalating cost. They made decisions together, quickly, without discussion, as if they'd been practicing for this without knowing it. Tyler noticed. He called twice in one day. Emma ignored both. By the third call, she answered. "You're avoiding me," he said. "I'm busy." With him. With the project. "You're making this personal." Emma paused. "You always do when you're losing control." Silence followed. That evening, Ryan found an envelope taped to the workshop door. Inside were copies of business filings, a notice of intent, a transfer of interest through a shell entity. The name on the documents wasn't Tyler's, but Emma recognized the structure immediately. He wasn't confronting them. He was positioning himself. Ryan brought the envelope to Emma without comment. She read it once. Then again. "He's buying debt," she said. Ryan frowned. "Whose?" "Anyone's he can leverage." They didn't panic. Panic was inefficient. Emma pulled her laptop closer. "If he's moving quietly, it means he doesn't want this public. That gives us time." "How much?" "Not much." They divided tasks without discussion. Ryan contacted his bank, his suppliers, his insurer, confirming details he'd never needed to question before. Emma traced the shell company through layers of filings, building a picture of Tyler's approach. "He's trying to corner you," she said later that night. "Force a situation where he can step in as a solution." Ryan leaned back in his chair. "He thinks pressure will make us fold." "Yes." Ryan considered that. "He doesn't know us very well." Emma met his gaze. "He knows me. Or he thinks he does." They worked late into the night. Not touching, not circling. The intimacy was in the trust, in the assumption that the other would hold their end. The festival was 3 days away. Tyler's timing wasn't accidental. The Harvest Festival drew half the region into Aspen Creek. Media, vendors, investors. A public disruption would carry weight. A private collapse would go unnoticed. Ryan said it first. "He's planning something during the festival." Emma nodded. "He wants witnesses." The realization didn't frighten her. It clarified. The next morning, she went to the county office before it opened. She requested records, filed inquiries, asked questions that forced answers. She didn't argue. She didn't threaten. She simply made it more complicated for Tyler to move unseen. Ryan reinforced the workshop, financially, legally, practically. He consolidated accounts, clarified ownership, documented everything. The workshop became defensible in ways it hadn't needed to be before. That night, they stood outside the bookstore, watching workers set up stalls for the festival. "If this goes wrong," Ryan said, "you don't owe me anything." Emma turned to him. "I'm not here out of obligation." "I know." They didn't touch. They didn't need to. The pressure was building. Not between them, but against them. And for the first time, they were ready for it. The Harvest Festival transformed Aspen Creek without asking permission. By mid-morning, Main Street was closed to traffic. Booths lined the sidewalks, strung with lights that hadn't yet been turned on. The air smelled of cider, roasted nuts, and damp leaves. Music drifted from the small stage near the creek, uneven but enthusiastic. Outsiders arrived in steady waves, cameras slung around their necks, curiosity written openly on their faces. The bookstore stood at the center of it all. Its windows were clean now. The new table by the front window was occupied before noon. Ryan's furniture framed the space naturally, not as products, but as part of the room. People wandered in and out, asking questions, touching the wood, asking when the opening would be official. Emma moved through it calmly, answering questions, redirecting foot traffic, ensuring nothing disrupted the flow. From the outside, she looked like a local organizer. No one would have guessed that she was waiting for an attack. Ryan stayed near the workshop, keeping an eye on deliveries and equipment. He trusted Emma to handle what was coming. She trusted him not to interfere. Tyler arrived just after noon. He didn't come alone. 2 men followed him, one carrying a folder, the other scanning the crowd like security. Tyler looked perfectly at ease, as if this were a networking event arranged for his benefit. He approached the workshop first. "Ryan," he said, raising his voice just enough for people nearby to hear. We need to talk. Ryan wiped his hands slowly. About what? Tyler gestured to the man with the folder. I'm afraid this workshop is no longer yours. A murmur rippled outward. Tyler continued smoothly. I've acquired the outstanding interest on this property. Effective immediately, you're operating without authorization. The man opened the folder, displaying documents. People stopped walking. Phones came out. Ryan didn't react. He had expected this. Emma stepped forward from the crowd. That's incorrect, she said. Tyler turned, surprised. Emma, this isn't. This is exactly where I belong, she replied. She took the folder, scanning the top page briefly. You purchased debt, not ownership. Tyler smiled thinly. Which allows me to enforce terms. Only under specific conditions, Emma said, her voice carrying. Conditions that don't apply here. She looked up at the man beside Tyler. Your notice is invalid. The lien you're referencing was restructured 48 hours ago. The updated filing is already with the county. The man hesitated. Emma continued, louder now, ensuring the crowd heard every word. Additionally, your shell entity failed to disclose material interest during acquisition. That voids enforceability under state law. Tyler's expression tightened. You're bluffing. Emma turned her phone so he could see the confirmation receipt. I'm documented. Silence fell, heavy in public. Ryan watched Tyler realize something crucial. This wasn't a private conversation. This was a spectacle, and he was losing it. You manipulated filings, Tyler said quietly. No, Emma replied. I responded to them. Tyler looked around, aware now of the attention, the cameras. He lowered his voice. You're making a mistake. Emma met his gaze steadily. You already did. The man with the folder closed it slowly. We'll need to verify. Of course, Emma said. Take your time. Tyler stepped back, calculating, but there was nowhere left to move without retreating. The crowd began to murmur again, not confusion this time, but approval. Someone clapped. Then another. Tyler turned sharply and walked away. Emma didn't watch him go. She turned to Ryan instead. It's done, she said. Ryan exhaled slowly, the tension draining from his shoulders. Thank you. For what? For standing where everyone could see. That mattered more than the legal victory. As the festival resumed around them, music rising again, Emma felt something settle. Not relief. Resolution. She hadn't won by overpowering Tyler. She'd won by refusing to be managed. And Aspen Creek had witnessed it. The festival didn't end all at once. It thinned gradually, the way tension does after it has nowhere left to go. Music softened. Vendors packed up. Conversations shifted from excitement to routine. By evening, Aspen Creek began returning to itself. The bookstore remained open. Not officially, but people kept coming in, lingering, asking questions that no longer sounded speculative. They asked when it would open, not if. They asked about readings, workshops, displays. They asked Ryan about the furniture like it was already part of the town's identity. Emma watched it happen without intervening. Later, when the street finally cleared, she locked the door and leaned against it, exhaling for the first time all day. Ryan stood near the window. You didn't have to do that publicly. Yes, she said. I did. He nodded, accepting it. They didn't celebrate. There was no rush of relief, no dramatic release. What followed was quieter and more decisive. I'm not selling, Emma said. Ryan didn't respond immediately. He waited, the way he always did, until he was sure he was hearing intention, not impulse. Okay, he said. I'm staying, she added. If that complicates things. It does, he replied. In good ways. They stood together in the center of the room, surrounded by work that no longer felt temporary. Outside, the last festival lights flickered off. Inside, the future had already started, unannounced, unforced, and finally chosen. Months passed, measured not by calendars, but by moments. The bookstore thrived. Its windows reflected sunlight onto the street, drawing townspeople and visitors alike. Inside, the table by the front window was never empty. Children traced their fingers along its smooth surface. Artists pinned sketches and flyers nearby. Local authors held readings. Craftsmen displayed their work. It had become a hub, quietly alive, vibrant in its simplicity. Emma moved through the space confidently. She didn't announce her decisions. She demonstrated them. Contracts and finances were managed seamlessly, shipments coordinated without stress. Her efficiency was evident in her actions, not repeated as a mantra. Customers felt it. Ryan felt it. Ryan's workshop extended naturally into the bookstore. Pieces of furniture lined the walls, functional and beautiful, part of the story rather than distractions. He greeted each visitor with a warmth that had been tempered by the past, but now free from uncertainty. Every adjustment, every polish, every corner built spoke of care, patience, and deliberate craft. They moved through the space together, not clinging, not showing off, just present, sometimes in silence, sometimes exchanging glances that carried the weight of 10 years reconciled in an instant. One afternoon, a small crowd gathered for a local reading. Emma and Ryan stood at the back, observing. She whispered, "I never imagined it would feel like this." He smiled softly. "It feels like it was always meant to." The words weren't dramatic. They didn't need to be. The truth was in the quiet alignment of their lives, the integration of work and passion, love and dedication. No need to speak what was already understood. As evening fell, the streetlights flickered on. The warm glow reflected off the windows. The bookstore glimmered softly, alive and permanent. Emma closed her eyes briefly, listening to the hum of activity and the laughter that floated in from outside. Ryan's hand brushed hers naturally, a silent acknowledgement that the past was reconciled and the present secure. Aspen Creek had become more than a place to live or work. It was a testament to choices made deliberately, to trust restored, to love rediscovered. And for Emma and Ryan, it was home, finally, completely, and forever. Thank you for listening to the story. Write your thoughts in the comments.